first pick.
All right, we have another awesome guest with us today on the Clock, part of Just Baseball Media. Doesn't need much of an introduction, but he's the 2023 National Coach of the Year, won the national championship in 2023, and has brought 3 teams to the College World Series. We have head coach for LSU Tigers, Jay Johnson. Coach, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on. I know last time we had you on last year, we talked a little bit more about your journey kind of through coaching. Really want to focus on last season and the upcoming season for you all. I know that we've just wrapped up fall ball somehow into the new year, and we're 40 days away from the college baseball season. But what were some of the things that you were seeing this fall? What are you trying to build on from last year?
Yeah, I think we had a good fall. I'm excited. Yeah. It's a very new team. I think when you look at kind of the buckets of where our players are coming from, we actually only have 12 players that actually played in a game for us at LSU last year, which is crazy to think. But you look back at the last 2 drafts and we've had 22 players drafted. And so it was inevitable that, something like this was going to happen. Very good high school recruiting class, who I think some of those guys are going to transition and help right away. Very excited about those guys, not only for this year, but a really solid foundation for the program moving forward. And then we had a lot of work to do with losing a lot of, key players here over the last couple of years that we were able to get some good players out of the transfer portal. Had to get a few more than normally I like to do because of where the roster was and kind of the experience going out the door. You think about 23, we lost 8 of 9 guys that, were basically starters on that national championship team. And then last year, moving 10 of the 12 top pitchers on, 9 of those guys to professional baseball. So, to kind of balance the roster out, like I said, it's a lot of new, but it is talented, and I'm very excited to get started here.
Yeah, I know Tyler will probably have some questions related to that incoming freshman class, but the one thing you touched on is kind of the turnover on roster, and this is something I've been kind of asking every coach on the podcast. Is, to me, one thing that's been impressive about all the teams that you've coached is like how close that team is, how well they've developed team chemistry. For you, what goes into that when there's that constant roster turnover, right? How do you still develop that team chemistry and really build those solid locker rooms?
It's a challenge. And I think the word culture gets overused because I think every team in itself has its own culture. There's standards of programs that we all aspire to have. We certainly have those. But I think we're always making a mistake if we're not resetting it a little bit every year and making it specific to that team. So that's probably the first thing. The second thing is I've tried to never make the mistake of believing that our players should just automatically be good teammates or automatically be selfless. Like, I believe that's a skill that you have to teach. And so I think it starts with that. And then what we'll do immediately when we get back is kind of outline the path for this team to be successful in terms of what you're talking about, that togetherness dynamic, that mental and physical toughness dynamic, and then create the baseball pathway to win. And so that's really what the first 40 days or the next 40 days, as you said, are about. And hopefully you establish an identity, and then you can win enough games as you're going along, but then lean into, getting better at all those things as the season goes along.
Yeah. And I think the one thing too that you did really well with the transfer portal and incoming freshmen is bringing in kind of some of those really good personalities, some of those guys who can really step up to be leaders. You have a lot of talent on that roster, right, through the transfer portal and through the freshmen. So are there some guys that have really stuck out to you this fall that you think will make a significant impact for you all?
Yeah, I think overall I'm excited about the depth of the roster. Yeah. I think we had some really good high-end players last year. Obviously, we had 9 players drafted, and 3 of those pitchers were 3 of the best pitchers I've ever coached, with Holman and Jump and Herring. But once we were past those guys, we had some ups and downs, with the pitching staff. Tommy White, it's hard to ever imagine, having a better player, or a more clutch player than him. But a lot of times it was like if he or Jared Jones did not hit a home run, we weren't as good as offense as I'd like to have. And those guys really got better as the season went along. But this year, I think the complementary pieces and the depth and the number of options on both sides of the ball is probably where the strength of our team lies. And then we're going to have to work out like what is our best team and how is that constructed. I'm really excited about that. As far as a few guys that maybe stood out on the pitching side, I thought, Cade Anderson took some really good steps forward this fall. Really excited about him. He's obviously got talent, but I think he has the internal character, makeup, toughness to be a key guy. Couldn't be more excited about getting Chase Shores back from an injury. That was really one of the first real big recruiting wins that we got when we got here. And then he was off to a great start as a freshman. And then, 18 innings into it, had Tommy John. And we really missed him last year. Like it's really hard for me to go back and think about what 2024 even could have been, even though it was a good season had he stayed healthy. So I'm really excited to have Chase back. A couple of those freshmen are really good. Like they're really good and excited, and they'll be a key part of this thing on the mound with, Kason Evans and William Schmidt. And there's a number I'm leaving out. Anthony Ianson, has had a good track record. Zach Cowan is a very unique pitcher who I'm really excited about. Connor Ware, I think that's a name on the pitching side that a lot of people maybe don't know now that they are definitely going to know. If you ask me who was probably our best pitcher throughout the fall, I would say Connor Ware. So I'm excited about that group. There's a number of ways like we can kind of line it up. On the position player side, very excited to have Jared Jones back. I think that was a really big lift for our team, considering a lot of the other turnover. Stephen Milam had a really good freshman year. Really excited about a couple of the transfers that we brought in as well. Luis Hernandez from Indiana State, really strong fall. Chris Stanfield from Auburn, we've made some really strong adjustments with. Danny Dickinson, obviously, really good player. And just as we talked about, on the pitching side, there's some really good young players that, we've gotten to the program with, Derek Curiel had an outstanding fall. I don't really want to leave anybody out. Josh Pearson has had more clutch at bats than anybody in college baseball, since he's been here. It's great to have him back. Ashton Larson had a really good freshman year last year. Michael Braswell, has played for 3 years now in the SEC, and that's very valuable. So very well-rounded team. I think it's very interesting for as many new players as we have. I feel better coming out of the fall, like knowing a little bit more about what we have. And I'm excited about that.
Yeah. I was talking to Tyler before the episode, and like, I knew the roster was loaded, but like preparing for the interview, I was like, then I actually started going in depth, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this team is absolutely stacked. So I can see how like you want to make sure you mention every single guy. And you mentioned too, Chase Shores coming back. That was something that I was thinking about too. Just if you had Holman Jump and him last year, like what that 2024 team could have been. I mean, you already won 43 games without him. Just imagine having him in there too. It would have been nuts.
Yeah. People ask me about like adversity in that national championship season. And I can honestly say the worst I felt, the biggest pit I had in my stomach was he threw a 97-mile-an-hour fastball here in like the 8th inning to strike somebody out from Tennessee in a game that we won 6-4. This place is going bonkers. And he walked in and he said his elbow was bothering him. I was like, wait a minute, that was 97 miles an hour. Yeah. That didn't look like your elbow was bothering you. And then like the next day finding out like he needed Tommy John surgery. Like, I mean, I remember like a pit in my stomach of not just, I felt like we could get through 23, but I knew that was going to impact last year. But he's healthy. He's rocking and rolling. Pitches have improved, and excited to get him back out there.
I love it. Tyler, I'll turn over to you.
Yeah. So speaking of Chase, I remember watching him as a freshman. It was kind of like disjointed, like obviously big kid, long levers, stuff to kind of control everything. But like how has he, improved on that front, and how the secondaries have improved? Because I know obviously he touched 1 or 2 as a freshman, but like obviously it was fastball dominant. So kind of just working on the pitchability. How's that improved for him so far?
Yeah, I think you start with the fastball, obviously with him. I think he locates it incredibly well. It's a ball that's very difficult to square up. So, I think as a young pitcher, just like leaning into it and how well he commanded it, and the electricity of it, you lean into it. But this is a guy that works incredibly hard, wants to be a complete pitcher. I think the slider took massive steps forward this fall. We really, kind of set up some of his outings to ensure that and the changeup were being developed where what the talent is, what he can do. So we kind of pitched off of how do we get him better and kind of didn't worry about the results. And the results were still pretty good. And so that signified to me, an improvement in that stuff that you're talking about.
I love it. Tyler, I think was having some mic issues.
Oh yeah, I love when the mic decides to just crap out on me like halfway through this. The next question I did want to ask, because you mentioned Connor Ware, big JUCO guy for you guys, and that JUCO class coming in, like him, Blaze Priester, Tanner Reeves coming in. Just talk about those guys and how hitting the JUCO portal has been big for you guys.
Yeah, and again, like we're always trying to balance this thing out, like to make the best team we can in the immediate, and then also compete every single year. Like that's one of the great things about being at LSU is if you do it right, you can find yourself in contention just about every year. And it's really hard to win a national championship. I've always viewed my job as, how can I put us in position to win the national championship, and then or get to Omaha is probably a better way to say it. And then how you recruit and how you balance out young players, old players. I think that really matters because it is really hard to have a new team every single year like that. It doesn't feel like you can sustainably compete at the highest level. So those guys were really important, trying to get a little bit older. We only have 10 freshmen, I think, in the program right now, but that's a quarter of your roster. So, kind of balancing out that those guys specifically, mentioning Connor, like I said, he was probably our best pitcher throughout the entire fall. Really excited about that. He had a little bit of a back issue last year, and probably lucky us, to be honest with you, because it would have been hard to imagine him getting through the draft without, missing, a good part of the JC season. But he's healthy and strong and really pitchable, really good stuff. Blaze, you mentioned Blaze Priester, had a really strong fall offensively. I think he hit 7 or 8 home runs. But one thing we talked about was, improving the at-bats in between the homers, kind of going into the fall. And, the homers are great, but the at-bats between them were pretty good too. And that's something that I look for. I really like Tanner Reeves. I think he's a really good player to have on a roster, versatility with the infield, outfield. He's kind of an on-base, machine type guy. Which those guys tend to do well playing for me, and they do well playing for anybody, but we really value quality at bats here, and I think he'll fit into that.
Yeah, plus he has championship experience because he won the JUCO World Series, didn't he?
Yeah, I think tomorrow actually they're either getting their rings or visiting the governor's mansion in Texas or something like that. But I say, you can go back and celebrate that because those are really hard to win. And I think he broke a hits record in the World Series or something like that. So good player.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I was going to ask kind of the mentality of bringing in freshmen versus JUCO, right? JUCO, the guys have gone through the grind, having to go through the JUCO ranks and really grind it out for a couple of seasons. What is it like to have an important balance of guys like that who have that experience, who come in, know what it's like to go through just the everyday grind of a season to kind of mentor and teach the freshmen and as they kind of try to adjust to college ball as well?
Yeah, I think your returning players are the most important part of that because, and I would even say this as a coach, really proud of what we did at Arizona, really proud of what we did at Nevada, really proud at San Diego, and I was there for 8 years with Coach Hill. But going through an SEC schedule, season, preseason, conference tournament, regional, super regional, Omaha, you don't know what that's like until you actually do it. And, the 23 season was so good. I think last year's team actually missed out on some of the adversity that you normally have. Well, I think we had enough last year. These guys have a good feeling of it. So you really lean into a Michael Braswell that's had some ups and downs, whether it was at South Carolina or here last year and can really get through those things. You know, I mentioned Jake Brown is a really talented player, like a really talented player that was kind of in and out of the lineup. I feel like it was a good learning ground, you know, for him last year. You know, once we got Stephen Milam in there, I mean, he really showed what type of competitor he is. But, you know, playing the back part of the season with almost pretty much a broken foot and getting through it and getting some big hits, like, you know, that's really valuable. You know, the 40 innings that Cade Anderson got last year and the number of starts and postseason experience, like those guys probably, you know, they have to lead that. You know, Gavin Guidry, through the last out of the national championship game, you know, he struck out Vance Honeycutt, you know, who's a great hitter who we couldn't get out otherwise in that regional last year. You know, you really lean into those guys. And, you know, I think we have 8 players that were here in 23. So those guys now have just about seen it all. Like they really, really need to help. But what I will say about the young players that we've had, at least in the 4 years at LSU, these guys are the best positioned physically and appear to be best positioned mentally to make an important impact. When you talk about, you know, William Schmidt, Kason Evans, Derek Curiel, Cade Arambidi, so really good. Maverick Rizzi, you know, another really good freshman pitcher I'm excited about. And I'm leaving a couple guys out, and I'm not intentionally doing that, but I really like this group of freshmen.
Yeah, and I think that's an awesome perspective to have too, right? Because like I don't think people realize in the SEC, like if you get swept by a team, doesn't mean the next weekend's going to get easier and you're all of a sudden going to get things right back on track because you're playing some team that isn't as good as the last. Like every single team in that SEC conference, it's like back to back schedule. You have to be ready to go in the next series. So it's kind of cool to hear that experience.
Yeah, no doubt. And you know, I don't want to come across as like a homer or anything like that, but until you're in it, you don't know. I mean, we won 2 super regionals against SEC teams at Arizona, but doing that in one weekend is a lot different than doing it 10 in a row. So.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted to ask too about one of the biggest successes you had was your record at home, 27-9. Talk about playing in front of that home crowd at the box. Like, what does that mean for your team? How does that help you get things back on track too? Like just having that crowd there.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I had high expectations from it, just being a lover of college baseball. Yeah. You know, it's LSU and the box and the fans. And I mean, it's really exceeded my expectations. And people ask me about it all the time. The best way I can describe it is a Tuesday night game. So a non-conference game feels like a super regional game anywhere else. And I really feel like it lifts the players. I mean, you know, in 3 years, I mean, it doesn't mean we've played great in every game, but I feel like we've had one clunker game where it was like, that's not it. Like we were not ready to play. And over 3 seasons, like that's pretty good. And I think the fans really, really contribute to that.
I love that. Tyler, turn over to you.
All right, so I got 2 questions with regards to the Chapel Hill Regional last year. Because you mentioned Vance Honeycutt, and I remember he took you guys deep twice in Game 1 when you faced him in the winner's bracket, I think. But then you kept him quiet in the following 2 with a trip to the Supers on the line. So kind of just talk to me about facing that UNC lineup, because that 1 through 5 was probably the most dynamic lineup in the ACC last year.
Yeah, great team. And I really have a lot of respect for Coach Forbes and have for a long time. And so when the bracket came out, it was really interesting. We were playing so well, you know, played well in the SEC tournament, swept Ole Miss the last regular season series. Like we were rolling it, like it didn't matter what showed up on the bracket. Like we felt like we were in a good position. And I do feel that way. You know, we had talked about other teams, and there was really just the geography of it. There was only like 4 places we were going to go. So like we had a pretty good idea that was a possibility. But they were probably the best team outside the SEC last year. And those games were high level games. And I felt like we played well. And it's hard to ever say that and then not actually win. You know, I can't remember the guys. It was a left-handed hitter that hit behind him, was also a really, really good player. And you kind of had to pick your poison with who you were going to go after, open bases, those types of things. And ironically, we kind of handled those guys for 2 full games. And then it was the bottom of the order, that got us in the bottom of the 9th inning and an extra innings to, they won 4-3 and 11, and really what was a great game. And, really hard to talk about still. I got to be honest. I don't know that I've totally gotten over that, but really high level baseball. It's a regional that I'll always remember, and very proud of how we competed in it against a really good team. And I remember talking to Coach Forbes. I think they won. Well, they did win the super regional the next week, and felt like they could go win the championship. And they've done a good job. And that was a really good team where it kind of felt like it was their time, like last year. And I'm sure they're really good again this year, but old players knew what they were doing, loaded bullpen. It felt like it was their time, but it's a good competitive baseball. And if you're a college baseball fan, like, I don't know how the other ones went, but like that would be probably the regional everybody was drawn to last year.
100%. And I remember that left-handed hitter you're talking about, Casey Cook. I had multiple coaches from the ACC come up and tell me he was the toughest guy to get out all year last year. Like just straight up hits, is a really, really big pest to pitchers. Just would never. He was the toughest at bat, apparently, from what I've heard. So and then you had like Luke Stevenson in there. Like, yeah, he's a freshman, but like he's trying to think of like a comparison there, and like Kyle Schwarber is like the first thing that comes to my mind.
I would love to have anybody compared to Kyle Schwarber. That guy's, he's that's a great team, and no, he's a draft eligible sophomore. I saw, and obviously those left-handed hitting catchers are incredibly valuable, and I'm sure they'll be good again if we're playing them again in the postseason. Probably good for both of us, So
And I did also want to ask that environment at Chapel Hill, because personally for me, I think Boschmer Stadium has probably the best atmosphere in the ACC. And I don't think it really compares to a real SEC crowd, because SEC is number one for me. But for an SEC coach to go into a crowd like that for you, how did that feel compared to, say, the box?
Yeah, man, hats off to them. It felt like the biggest time baseball that there is. And I think sometimes we bring that out in people, because we are LSU. But I mean, I'm a sports fan in general. Like Roy Williams was there. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
Like Kirk Herbstreit was there. I thought that was cool. You know what I mean? So it was a good environment, and we learned a lot from that. So, when I think about, I mentioned some of the players, Jared Jones was unbelievable in that regional, Stephen Milam, walk-off homer, Josh Pearson, ton of hits, Cade Anderson, coming in and getting out a couple of those guys that you mentioned, in that UNC lineup. I think we'll be much better this year, because of that experience last year.
I actually had no idea Herbstreit was there either. Did he bring Ben with him? Do you know?
I don't know that, but I love college football. Like, the inside of me sometimes wishes I was a football coach. So I was like, no way, he's here. That's sweet.
That's awesome.
I actually tweeted about the game or something like that after the fact, and somebody showed that to me, and it was just like, complimenting both teams, and it's like, sweet. He's talking about the Orange Bowl, and he's talking about LSU baseball, which is cool.
That's awesome. And then that was like to get Bill Belichick this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about that?
That'll be a fun time.
Yeah.
So I was just going to dive into some fun questions just to wrap up the podcast as well. The first one is, I always like to know, like, what do you do outside of baseball for fun to kind of relax, unwind from the game, get your mind off of bad performances and those kind of things?
Yeah. Not very good at it. The players will make fun of me sometimes about, referencing what goes on at the Johnson house after a tough loss and extra innings. And it's usually 3 a.m. and drinking a glass of orange juice, staring at the moon. So 47 years into life, I'm still not a very good loser, to be honest with you. It's an all consuming deal for me.
Mm-hmm.
Try to exercise and stay healthy and just relax when you have downtime, legitimate, try to make it downtime, which, the Christmas holiday is great and usually always gets you ready to go for the year and, excited about that.
I love it. if you could coach any team, past or present, which one would it be and why? And it can be teams that you've coached in the past.
Ooh, well, I got a lot of tied for first in that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm going to take one from every spot that I've been. You know, at Point Loma, like we went to the World Series, played for the national championship in 2004, or finished third, excuse me, in the College World Series. Great players. I mean, guys that I was pretty close in age with at that time. Like a lot of those guys they're really good friends of mine now. You know, at San Diego in 2007, we like led the country in hitting. We're a national seed, you know, at a West Coast Conference school, we were a national seed, and something to always be really, really proud of. And then at Nevada 2015, we won the first, you know, Mountain West championship in school history. And it's awesome to look back and see how many guys have been successful in pro baseball from that team. And then at Arizona, you know, both those teams that went to Omaha 2016, you know, our first year, I mean, we were picked to finish 10th out of 11 in the Pac-12 and, you know, had the winning run on second base, you know, in the College World Series to win the national championship. Like when you talk about it, like guys buying in and, you know, like completely getting something on track and in the right direction, that was that. And then, you know, 2021, you know, we lost to Vanderbilt and Stanford and Omaha, but those guys were great offense, and we'd had a lot of them for 3 years. It was kind of the, you know, when you talk about building a program, developing a program, taking lumps as freshmen, you know, a lot of those guys, like 5 of them started as freshmen. And then in their junior year after COVID, like we were in position to win a national championship. But, you know, 2023, you know, that team obviously won it all, but when you talk about Cade Beloso and the human being that guy is, you know, you talk about Gavin Dugas, the type of human being that guy is, on top of, you know, having the best pitcher on the planet, who's basically the best human being on the planet. And then Dylan Cruz, best player, best human. And all those guys just made it about the team. Like it's really hard to explain. Like, you know, what I've told people is like, you know, my goal is we want to win another national championship here or more. I don't know if we'll ever have that again. And that's just speaking to the character of those guys. And, you know, so I've been blessed, you know, there you go. One from every school that I've been at.
I love it. Yeah. As a Nevada alum, I'm always got nostalgia for that 2015 team.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I had a good, this was a really good, end of the summer or whatever, like, Trenton Brooks, you know, finally made it to the major leagues. I think he was the MVP of the Mountain West that year. Cal Stevenson's in the major leagues with the Phillies. It's awesome. We were mentioning Schwarber, and it's like we've got Schwarber, Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, and then Cal Stevenson out there making a diving catch in center field, you know, 5'9", but total baller. You know, Austin Byler, QB Meyer, Christian Stolo. I mean, I go on and on. Like that was a special team. Yeah,
I love it. Next question I had is, if you had walk-up songs for coaching staff, what would yours be?
I had the Tiger, no question about it.
I love it. That's amazing. So walking up to give the lineup to the umpire, throw that on. Last one I got, and Tyler, I don't know if you have any more here, but what's a memorable or funny story from your time as coach that sticks out to you the most?
Oof. There's been a lot along the way. I don't know that any of them, you know, really stand out, you know, that I think of. I can remember one time, like walking into the team meeting room, like in like gray pants when we were clearly wearing white pants, and we were so like locked in on like scouting preparation, what we're going to do against this pitcher, that I couldn't even get my uniform right. And the guys weren't nice enough to let me know and let me get on the bus with the wrong pants on. So.
That's awesome. Coach, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us. We know you have such a busy schedule, and you're always so gracious with your time and for all these kind of media appearances. So we're wishing you nothing but success in 2025, and we'll definitely be watching.
Awesome. Keep up the good work. Thanks, guys.